says that I have courage, let me tell you that she always asks you to confront your fears. I have two. I don't teach people shorter than me. And I don't fly over water. It was hard by bus to Czechoslovakia. And I have 9 first-grade classrooms. Watch what you say. Comes back to haunt you. Before I tell you a little bit about what I've learned, let me give you a little sense of the context so you understand when we say we're talking about change. To understand what kind of change these people have been willing to go through, you need to have some understanding of their background. So first, let me tell you that there's no place like this except in the multi-million-dollar American-only hotel in town where I could go for some kind of training, except we could never afford it. I would have to add like tons of scaffolding, because everything there is under construction. I would have to add tons of pollution, because before the Russians left, they put all of the oil from their tankers into the water system. And they have no restrictions on the toxins that are put into the atmosphere and the environment. And so I can't wait to come home every time and just breathe and get a drink of water. It is, however, since they've gotten rid of the communists, the first time that they've ever experienced homelessness. Because their people just moved in with each other. They have no sense of personal space. But the other thing this country was not was communist. Only 20% of them were. And they didn't know which 20% were. And they had no idea who would turn them in and who was being forced by the secret police to turn in the person that they could hear next door, because all of the houses are made by cinder block and they're all identical. And you have to remember the number of your building so you can get home at night, because they all look alike. So this is a place that when you're talking about absence of threat, they're talking about incredible changes. Let me tell you something about the school system. When I first went there, the first time I was there, they took me to meet the woman who was the superintendent of elementary education. And I don't speak the language at all, and I didn't at that point in time understand any of it. And the first time I was there, they just whisked me off in this car, and we were singing in this woman's office, and I don't know what she was talking about, but she was furious. She was really furious. And when she finally left the room, I said, now what's really wrong? What have we done? I was only there 2 days. You know what she said? She couldn't believe that we wanted to make this kind of change in education because she couldn't believe her kids could learn longer than 45 minutes at a time. Their system of education rings bells every 45 minutes. But you know what they do in those breaks? The teachers leave the room and the kids are alone. And the first time I walked into a school where they did that, it was absolutely chaos. Because these are very old schools, and they're made of brick, and they're made of cinder block, and they're made of metal, and kids are running up and down the halls, all around the rooms, in very crowded furniture, and the teachers are down the hall. And then they come back, they peel the kids off the wall, and then they'd scream at them again. And she really wanted to keep this system going. And I thought, now why does she really want to keep these systems going? You know what I discovered? They pay their teachers by the lessons they teach. And they're trained to be mediocre. And so that if you taught more lessons than the average teacher, you got in trouble. They all have jobs, but they don't have anything to do for more than an hour a day. And so they all go shopping in the middle of the day because who cares? There's nothing else to do, and you get in trouble if you ask to do more. And when I say ask to get in trouble, I mean the secret police come to your house 2 o'clock in the morning, say I'm just taking a room check. And you never know when that might happen and who might turn you in because they were checking the information that was there. And they were also, now when you talk about you have to follow the textbook, this is a government-written curriculum that every day, every kid is doing the same exact thing. Because they're all visited by government inspectors who can check their plan book to see if they have taught the right thing on the right day. And if you had a child who didn't get it immediately, as in adequate time, you had to doctor up your plan book so you wouldn't get in trouble. So that's the kind of system that we went to. And before I went there, Susan went there. And Susan talked to a number of people that were interested in what changes might be possible, and they tried it, individual people in a variety of schools, and they realized that that really couldn't work for them at all. So they talked the government into giving them a project school. Except they didn't, by the time I got there in September, have complete permission, except they got the teachers hired. They didn't have a principal that was willing to take on the job, so they appointed a caretaker principal that would watch them and at least approve the furniture because it was a new building and somebody had to sign in the furniture. But she kept ringing the bells because she was still on the old system and she knew the program had not yet been approved. And these teachers knew that at any point in time they would be told they have to go back to the old system because we don't have the authorization yet. In fact, that authorization didn't come until November. And it only came in November because the parents started writing petitions to the local district who finally said, we have to approve this, because the parents were so excited about what was happening in the first 2 months of these people attempting to do what they needed to do. But the other thing you need to know about that is we didn't know it was happening. So when I arrived in September, we had no idea we had a project school. We had no idea that they'd taken 7 first-grade classroom teachers and trained them with what it is that they could remember. And the big way they trained them was by showing them the videotape of the classroom of the 21st century. Now, if you've never seen it, it's about what this model looks like after you've been doing it for 5 years in a 4th grade classroom. Well, I walked in the first week of school in 1st grade. Well, they're in small cooperative learning groups. And now you're the reporter, and you're the recorder, and you're the supply. And they're looking at me like, how come this is not working? And you know what I discovered? Because they would go on like, it was absolutely chaos. The first visit I was there, absolutely chaos. I discovered 2 things about them. One, they have been trained to do absurd things and not question it, because they'd get in a lot of trouble if they did. Second, when I started to talk to them about, well, you know, we have to have these guidelines and there is some positive discipline about what you do, they said, you have rules? They made the assumption that democracy equals freedom equals chaos. And so when it started going crazy, that's what they thought we were doing here. And so they really thought they were on the right track. Let me tell you something about what change means to them. It's not what it's cracked up to be. They'd like to go back to communism, many of them. It's much harder than they ever thought it would be. And, you know, they'd say to me, you know, we have to stay at school till 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, oh, isn't that strange? See, they're done at noon. They only go from 8 to 12. So they couldn't quite figure out what it is that we would be doing in American school all afternoon. And so when I talked to them about the kind of plans that they need to think about doing, they said, oh gosh, this doesn't make any sense to me. How can I really work? You really work this hard in America? And then I would say to them, you know, we're going to need to create these other materials so we can have multiple intelligence activities. And they'd say, you know, we only get paid as much as dishwashers do. And it's a brand new school, but it's empty. We just got a copy machine in June. There's no such thing as dittos in this school. They can't make them. And so I'll go to these classes, and they're all on little pieces of paper. The little activity they're doing with the kids, they're all cutting them up, and they're all like handing out little scraps, and that's the math problem, or that's the activity that they're doing. They're all handmade materials that you see, and when you see the videotape in a few minutes, you'll notice that all the stuff that they've been able to do in their classroom, they had to make themselves, because there was nothing available for them. But let me tell you what it is that I learned from them. They have a tremendous desire to make change, because they have realized that your form of education determines the kind of life you lead. And that if you want to have democracy, you need to have it learned in the school system that you want to have. So they have they've done 2 things. One, they've made a decision to trust me. It was a decision. And they had to make it consciously. Because when I come in and watch, I look like the government inspector. And when they say they're going to make changes in the kind of curriculum they're doing, they know every other school in the state is doing the same thing on the same exact day. And so for them to think about what it is that they want to do was a decision for them to trust me. The second thing is that they had to have a tremendous willingness to try new things. Let me give you an example of what that means. In first grade, that's the first time they learn the alphabet. They don't learn it in kindergarten. And they believe you cannot teach words until they have all the letters. And so they would want to say to me that our kids are wonderful in first grade because they can recognize and repeat 40 non-related words by Christmas. There is nothing in a book that looked like a story. By the end of June, they might have some sentences. And so I said to them, you know, if you want to use these multiple intelligences, we have to find some poems, we have to find some songs that reflect the theme that you're talking about. You have to put them up on the board. Well, I come back the next month, all over the board. They don't have a clue about whether or not I'm right, but all the poems are up there, all the songs are up there. I mean, it is the most frightening experience in your life. It's like the oral tradition of the Bible. They take down every last word that you say, and as soon as you come back, they're trying it. They don't know if it's going to work, but they're trying it. And there's nothing I say that they don't try. So they have made a decision to trust me, and they have an incredible willingness to try new things. And let me tell you what they look like now. Those classrooms that you see on this videotape, and I say this to you only because their classrooms are so poor that you might not really easily recognize what it is that they're doing. But all their classrooms look like ITI classrooms. They all have their brains up. They all have their guidelines up. They all have their life skills. In fact, one of their teachers drew their own version of the life skill posters, so they all have their posters up. They have and they don't have overhead projectors or any other kind of materials. They have these miracle blackboards that like open and fold. And so every day has to be done on the blackboard. So there's nothing you can keep up permanently. And so on one side, anything that looks like a mind map is their daily agenda. They'll have key points. They'll have the little poems that they're teaching the kids that they're doing. They will have their key points. And you know what else this school has? It's getting, in September, a library. That's against the law. You're not allowed to have school libraries. So all of the parents got together and they have petitioned the school district that the district library will be located in the school so they have access to it. And they need to figure out what it is that they can do to keep that room open so people from the district can come and visit during the hours when the school isn't open so they can have a library. And remember what I said to you about recess and the fact that they would take those breaks and the new principal was kind of still ringing the bells? Well, one time I walked into the school and one of the teachers, it was bell time. And she had all the kids behind her. I said, well, where are you going? Well, they're ringing the bell. It's supposed to be recess. I have this position I'm supposed to take, but I know I can't leave my kids. So we're all going. They'd made all of those changes themselves. And let me tell you what the end of the year was like for me. I went to the school, and we had gotten one of the teachers just to be willing to be a principal, but he hasn't a clue about being a principal. He's a wonderful man, but has very poor communication skills, doesn't know how to cooperate and share with the other people that are there. And so the place was getting ready to break down. They're wonderful teachers, but they have no leader at this point in time. So I had a process day, and I'm going to have a happy little what animal and plant do you feel like here at the end of this year? Well, the plants were all dying and the animals were ready to run away. And I thought to myself, well, this has been a wonderful year. Except that the next day, I started teaching the new teachers for next year. We have 290 children for next year for first grade in this school. And so we had to train all of the new teachers. And so I started to do that. Because I figured, well, you can just keep going because you have no idea. Every time I go back, something changes in here. So I figure I'll start, even though yesterday it felt like it was coming apart. I start, and I started training, and then I invited 2 of the teachers from this year to come back just to share what they had. Well, they brought us to their classroom. They talk those teachers through the whole model, saying, now this is my mind map for the year, and this is what it looks like when we do our components for the month, and this is our activities for the year, and this is the group cooperative learning project that we did, and this is the story our first grade children were able to write about the activity that we did, and they went through every last step of the model that I didn't really understand that they grasped. And then the next day, the principal came in, and he says, I think I'm going to volunteer to resign. Because you know what? This is really important, and this is about giving birth, and birth hurts, and it's costing me a lot, but it's much more important that this project be able to continue. So they're going to take the woman who's the vice principal that does have some of those skills, and they're going to appoint teachers that are part of the advisory board, and they're calling it their new democratic model. And let me tell you what it is then that I've learned from them. I've learned that your weaknesses are also your strengths. You know, Susan says that my strength is clarity. It's also my weakness. I make people crazy. You know, you think that I'll get rid of my bad qualities and I'll keep the good ones. They're the same. And so what I have discovered is their ability to do things that don't make sense without questioning it, to expect the chaos, has been the thing that's gotten them through the year. They've been able to do the transition painful experience because they expected it. And they thought it would hurt. And they've learned how not to question that. And just keep moving on. And so I would suggest to you that the Slovaks have a lot that they can share with you in terms of their ability to make change. I have also learned one of the things that is a challenge if you do this method is that it has life skills. I might have courage, but it's not a life skill. At least it's not on this list. But you know what is? Initiative is. And I'm doing what I'm doing because I'm responding to Susan's initiative. I didn't start this. I just followed it up. I just said yes, because if she says we're going to have life skills, she lives them. But let me tell you something about life skills because of my position in the spiritual realm of life. Saying you want to have a life skill can oftentimes be interpreted by the spiritual being as a prayer. And so a couple years ago I said I would like to be flexible. And while I'm over there trying to figure out how to get the plane to go back and forth, you know, the first time I went there, it took me 4 hours to get from one side of JFK to the other. I asked for check air, they thought I wanted to check in. And it took me 2 hours, and I was desperate for somebody who spoke English before I could get out of the country. But you know what I've learned? In the middle of all of this, I say to myself, I asked for this. Because when you work with a model that has life skills and you have a hard day, you better watch out about whether or not you've asked for patience or perseverance. And thank God I asked for sense of humor. You know? Let me finish with two things. You have all gotten your change pins, but I never know who's going to show up in Czechoslovakia, so we don't give out those pins at the end because we can't predict it. But what I do give them at the end of each program are flower seeds. And they're so cute. They hold out their hand, and I'm giving them little seeds. And I can't even finish getting through the group, and they're taking out little pieces of paper, and they're putting their seeds because they need to get them home. And they don't want to lose them. because they know that whatever it is that they've gotten is very fragile and very precious to them, and whatever it is that's going to be possible with the seed that they've learned is up to them to plant and nurture so it comes back to life. Because you know, if you look at your pin, change is on the flower. You don't get the change until it blooms. And you need to take care of your seed. But then I tell them to do this. Put out your hand. You know what else is there? The future of the children of the world. And there's no other job that has the power of a teacher. So what you have there is not only a seed, it's their future. Let me show you one last thing that I do with them. Because one of the things I want you to think about as you look at this videotape, and as you've thought about multiple intelligences, and the importance of seeing things with different types of intelligences, for them, their need right now is to see what life is like that's better. They can't help themselves because they've all been self-trained. They needed us to come there because they had no vision of how to make it better. And so they depend on me. They depend on the young woman that's going to have the courage to move her family there in September and live with them for the year. They depend on the pictures that I can bring back of the ITI classrooms. They depend on you. They depend on whether or not we take the lead to make that future better, because if you don't make it better, I don't have anything to bring over to them to tell them about what's possible. Because if they look around them, it's not possible. You're what makes it possible. This model is about making connections. This is the sign for making connections, to be connected. And I always share this with them, but let me tell you that I'm going to share it with you because I'm going to broaden its definition. This is the sign for I. Please do it with me. I am connected to you. Now this is where it changes. We are connected as one. And I want you to know that after you look at this videotape, that we should mean something else to you. Because it's not just those of us that are here in this room. We're taking care of the world by the leadership that we have. And I'm connected to you. But those people that I know, those people that have a tremendous amount of courage, that have been willing to face a tremendous amount of their fears to make incredible changes, depend on you for the energy to do that. So as you look at their faces, think about making a connection with them, because they're really connected to you. And they want to know what's happening here in America. And someday they may come to visit your classroom. And when they do, they'll do that because they got connected enough to this program to know that you had some hope for them. In Slovak, they say ďakujem. Translation, thank you.